Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to part 5 of No Job Now What? Today's webinar is entitled Leaving the Hospitality Industry. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. Mute your audio on your computer, on your mobile, on your office phone or home phone, if you have a home phone. Make sure that background noise is all away, and we're going to go ahead and get started. So our agenda for today, we're going to share the results of the Leaving the Hospitality Industry survey. Then we'll go into the presentation with Michelle Carlin. And of course, along the way, we'll take questions from the audience. And then at the conclusion, we'll actually be addressing the questions that were submitted on the survey. And then if there's any other Q&A that you have along the way, don't hesitate to put it in the chat box. If you want to keep it private, just make it private directly to me, and I'll be happy to keep that anonymous. Otherwise, you can put it out in the public, and other people, including our panelists, could answer those questions as well for you. Okay, so let's get started. The survey results. Question number 1: how long have you been in the hospitality industry? 3% said under 3 years. No one was in the 4 to 6 range. Only 5% were in the 7 to 10, and a full 92% were 10 or more years in the business. Question number 2 was, what is your current employment status? 28% said they've been laid off for 0 to 3 months, 51% 4 to 6 months, 21% 7 to 12, and no one's been out for over a year yet. Question number 3 was, how many jobs outside the hospitality industry have you applied for since your layoff? 84% said they've applied for up to 25 jobs. 8% said from 26 to 65. No one has applied for 66 to 100 jobs, and actually 8% have applied for more than 100 jobs. That's absolutely remarkable. Question number 4, have you considered starting your own business? This is really interesting. 38% said yes, about a third, and 62% said no. I have an interesting article from the Wall Street Journal. It was actually from the 26th, only a couple days ago. Applications for employer identification numbers that entrepreneurs need to start a business have passed 3.2 million so far this year, compared with 2.7 million at the same point in 2019. Really remarkable. That's according to the US Census Bureau. And that group includes gig economy workers and other independent contractors who have actually struck out on their own after being laid off. This pandemic is actually inducing a surge in employer business startups that takes us back to the days before the decline in the Great Recession, says John Haltewanger, who's an economist at University of Maryland who studied the data. So really, really remarkable. It's actually, there's a lot of people starting their businesses now, more than ever, which is pretty good. And finally, question number 5, do you think you're ready to leave the hospitality industry? Almost a third said yes. 13% said no, and 56% said maybe. Probably on the fence, probably want to see what's out there. And in the webinar today, I'm sure we'll probably cover a lot of that information. So I'm going to introduce our webinar panelists today. We have Nick Reed from Travel Staff, along with Imelda Bermudez. We have Brian Marcus and Eden Sleeger from Global Hospitality. And I'm Mitch Woolley from eMarketing, and I'll be your moderator today. So our speaker today is Michelle Carlin, and she's the founder and president of Alignment Advising. With over 2 decades of career experience in hospitality, tourism, and property management, she is dedicated to helping businesses by creating long-term strategy, growing sales and revenue, implementing process improvements, developing organizational infrastructure, and improving client and employee experience. She also helps and coaches individuals advance their professional development and gain clarity, confidence, and direction along their career paths. Ladies and gentlemen, here she is, Michelle Carlin.
Thank you, Mitch, for that kind introduction. Good morning to everyone on the West Coast. Good afternoon to everyone that may be in alternative locations. It is really a delight to spend this time with you today, and I have a lot to cover. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Excuse me. And before we get started, I want to let you know that there is, excuse me a second. There is an opportunity to ask questions in between some of the slides, and I'll let you know when that is. But if you have other questions and you want to go ahead and put them in the chat box, that's fine as well. Mitch will be monitoring that, and we'll take it from there. But I do want this to be interactive. I don't want it to just be me, you know, speaking at you. So we'll do the best we can in order to accommodate everyone. So again, this is the part 5, leaving the hospitality industry, brought to you by HSMAI and HFTP. So our takeaways today, I want to review those with you, just so as we're going along, you make sure that you check these off your list. We are going to uncover ways to learn about what your alternative interests are aside from hospitality, as well as your passions. We're going to learn other industries that you can transition to from hospitality. We're going to look at identifying your transferable skill set. We're then going to help you form some actionable steps. It's really my hope that by the end of this presentation, and by no means is it completely exhaustive, but it is meant to give you a big picture of how to go about moving forward. And so I'm hopeful that you'll be encouraged and feel supported by the end of this webinar. And of course, we'll open it up for questions and answers. One second here, I've got a technology issue. Okay. So I want to acknowledge HSMAI and HFTP and really say thank you to them. It's a little bit strange to be working with a hospitality association and then giving a presentation on leaving the hospitality industry. But I think it's important to say thank you to these associations, to the membership that's on, as well as any guests, to acknowledge that one of the things I love about hospitality is the service-oriented nature of what we do. And these organizations care about you, and we're gonna look at some stats, and you'll see why we are giving this information to you. We want to arm you if you cannot remain in the hospitality industry. So according to the American Hotel and Lodging Association, there's a 38% unemployment rate right now in the hospitality and leisure sector. 68% of hotels have less than half of their staff, and that's prior to the pandemic. 8,000 domestic hotels could be closed or foreclosed upon by this month, and we're already at the end of the month. And I know there's a lot of information coming out this week about this. 74% of domestic hotels expect to lay off more workers. And so these are just facts that I'm highlighting. Obviously, we all have our own experience with what we're dealing with COVID and other situations in the global environment. So I want to discuss some data here that might be helpful for setting the tone for our discussion today. And according to the Harvard Business Review, they actually reported on a survey that was done by a firm where they interviewed, after the 2008 Great Recession, they interviewed 6,816 respondents, and they looked at if they remained in the hospitality industry. If not, how did they transition out to, and what job types did they go to? So this was after they had been in a job that was unrelated to hospitality for more than 3 months and up to 3 years after the recession. So this is very comprehensive. And I'll start actually at the bottom of the graph. The blue shows the percentage of people transitioning, and then the green is the average salary. I'll let you read that information for yourself. I'm just gonna look at the percents here. So about 54% remained in hospitality. The rest you see here, there's a variety of groups. So the highest transition was to business management, and we'll get into that in the presentation. The next highest job type was moving into a sales role, followed by administrative and office work, followed by advertising, marketing, PR. Then we've got retail and HR, business operations, journalism, and education, all within 2 to 3 percentiles. So This shows you that it is possible to move to a different job type. It doesn't specify what industries these were, but I wanted to share this information because truly I think it's imperative as we move forward. Any questions on the data? Okay. So transition, which is what we're all going through right now, is not a final destination. Imagine, if you will, being in an industry that you love for 20 years. You spend time working your way up the corporate ladder and things are going great. You're managing a team and suddenly, and in a very difficult way, you experience job loss. Does this sound like your situation right now? Perhaps it is you. But truly, this story is about me. 2 years ago, this was my situation. And it was in a very, again, unexpected way and left me with a dizzying dismay. Now, growing up, my parents took my brother and I all across the United States, Canada, and Europe. And so there was always a passion and love for hospitality and tourism. And my mom actually worked for a travel agency. And when I was a teenager, she said, "You need to get a job." I'm like, "Okay, help me get a job, Mom." And so she called up her old boss, or she said, "Call up my old boss at the travel agency and see if he'll hire you." So that's actually how I started in hospitality. I was working as an office assistant for him. And I also worked part-time as a server in several restaurants. Now, I had somewhere in my head that I wanted to be a general manager of a hotel. I don't know where this came from. And at the time, I entered the Collins School of Hospitality at Cal Poly Pomona. And I was sure that this is what I wanted to do. In speaking with a university counselor, they suggested, you may want to just have more of an overall focus on business. So consider just a degree in marketing and sales. I heeded this advice and I thought, okay, I can do that. As time went on, I ended up in the CVB realm. And funny enough, I was referred to it by my first boss at that travel agency. And I have represented 6 destinations, really thousands of hotels, thousands of restaurants, thousands of attractions, tour operators, activity partners. And so I've been immersed a lot in group sales and travel trade, but also marketing, PR, and membership management. Now, I moved my way up. I was an assistant, I was promoted to a coordinator, eventually a manager, and ultimately a leader of multiple teams at varying CVB organizations. So now here I am without a job. And, you know, if you haven't experienced job loss, it's hard to quite comprehend what goes through your head. But I sat there and I thought, okay, this is just overwhelming, right? And I chose to look for multiple jobs. I looked for positions within the industry. And then I started looking for positions outside of the hospitality industry. And I applied for hundreds of jobs. I had lots of interviews. I even had a job offer. And what I decided was I really needed to take a step back. I needed to use this opportunity to pause and figure out, is this what I want to do the rest of my life? Because I always had this idea that I wanted to bring a little bit more of my skill set and my purpose to whatever I was going to do next. So I made the decision to start with some part-time clients. And I really enjoyed that because it was a little bit of a downtime. It gave me some time to think about perhaps owning my own business. And so I did decide to take the leap of faith and start my own company. And so here I am. I have started Alignment Advising. It's a business consulting and professional development firm. And people ask me, why alignment? Well, what is alignment? It means that all parts are adjusted in proper position in relation to each other to allow for coordinated functioning or matching agreement. So alignment advising helps organizations and individuals more easily reach their goals and ultimate success. By identifying roadblocks, navigating and overcoming challenges, alignment is reached through the readjustment of resources, creation of effective strategies, development of professional tools, and training. So think about if your neck is out and you decide, oh, I must be out of alignment. I need to go see a chiropractor. You go to that chiropractor and they adjust, the vertebrae in your neck and your back. You walk out of there. Hopefully you're not in pain. Hopefully you actually feel better and you're more easily to function. So consider me your chiropractor for your professional development steps. Okay, now into the meat of this presentation. Today we're going to identify 4 steps to moving forward. And this is going to be your roadmap. What I've heard and what I've read about people in our industry experience job loss, especially as it's so prevalent right now, is that they feel lost and they don't know where to begin. There's no starting point. So what I'm hoping that this will provide you is a starting point and then a roadmap for yourself. So we're going to go through these steps. I'm going to take any questions before we jump into the steps. Is there anything in the chat, Mitch? Oh, can't hear you.
Sorry, I've muted myself.
That's okay.
Nothing so far.
Okay. So I love this quote. If nothing ever changed, there'd be no butterflies. And isn't that true? So our first step today is to evaluate. And the reason I'm starting with this is because if you have your phone and you're going somewhere and you pull up your map or your GPS, you need to know where you are, right? Where are you and where are you going? So what is your outlook? Are you open-minded? I'm going to say that if you are open-minded, your chances of being successful through this process will increase. And what I mean by being open-minded is that you consider all options that come to the table. And we'll talk more about that. Are you willing to learn? If you're on this webinar, you are willing to learn. And I'm going to venture to say that a number of you have completed different trainings and education online through the pandemic, which is awesome. Are you self-motivated? You need to know if you're self-motivated, because if you're not, you need to figure out how to become self-motivated, because this is a very intense process. Are you a risk taker? Now, so it depends on maybe who you're asking, but if you consider yourself a risk taker, I say good. And then are you thinking positively? Because this is overwhelming. There is a lot of anxiety out there. I'm not going to deny that. It's uncomfortable. However, in the uncomfortableness, you will actually grow. So where do you stand? And you all need to answer these questions for yourself. Everyone here on the call is in a completely different situation. I can't know through osmosis what you're going through. But I will tell you that your best case scenario is that you have time on your side, you have resource on your side, and you're going to be able to do these steps, and you're going to be able to plan what is going to be happening in your life. If you're in a worst case scenario, which is like, Michelle, I don't have time for this, I actually need to go find a job tomorrow, just be aware of that. Be cautious, be patient with yourself, and we'll talk more about that. And then other scenarios, you may find yourself in a combination of the two. You might have a little bit of savings, you might have a little bit of time on your side, but you're still like, I think I want to do something else, but I don't know what it is. We can figure that out.
Michelle,
so let's talk. Yes.
There's actually a question relating to this. Are there any tools to determine things about yourself?
There's a number of different assessments. If you've heard of Myers-Briggs, if you've heard of the DISC profile, I would defer to the panelists as well on some other recommendations, but if you want to take a behavioral assessment or any other type of test of that sorts, that will help you with this as well to figure out what it is that you're really good at. Okay, so what fuels you? We're going to talk now about interests and passions and how that might lead to your next steps. And interests and passions are kind of two different things. They might be one and the same. I'm going to use some examples for you. So think about in your spare time when you're not working, what are the things that you're doing? Do you have a hobby? Now, one of my interests and my passions is art. I do watercolor art painting. And so I would say if you can make a list, jot down 2 to 3 things that you love to do. It could be, you know, cooking. It could be gardening. Those are the things that are interests. And they also might be your passions. They're not always. So you may belong to different groups. You might belong to an online group about cooking that's sharing recipes and things like that. Of course, sports and clubs are huge as well. When you think about all the different sporting events and all the different types of sports there are, there's a number of clubs. You might belong to a running club. You might belong to a hiking club. I don't know. You need to answer those questions. Products and experiences. So what products do you love or gravitate towards, or what experiences? You may decide that I'm really into health and wellness. I love vitamins, and so this is an interest for you. You could also be volunteering, and it could be for a charitable organization, it could be for a food bank. These are all things that if you delve a little bit further into, and the people that are associated with these groups may be the next door that you're walking through, but you have to do a little bit of digging. We're going to come back to this later in the presentation, but again, I hope you're writing down these points as I'm going through this, because this is really important. Any questions on interest and passion? Nope.
No, none, sorry.
Okay, that's okay. So step 2 is identify options. This is the biggest question people are wanting to know besides transferable skill set. What industries or segments can you more easily transition to from hospitality? Now, I'm only covering a few examples here. This is, again, not an exhaustive list. I'll have the panelists chime in if they wish. But what I think of when I think of an easy transition from hospitality is what other industry segments have a similar business model, okay? So an example, I mentioned that I actually, I have experience in property management. I was the president of my homeowners association years ago. But community and property management is a great one if you haven't looked into this. So this could be an apartment building that you're actually the manager of the apartment building. And when you think about property management, it's heads and beds, right? It's similar to hotels. It's on a long-term period, but it is the same concept. It could also be that you're managing multiple properties. So you're actually managing the assets, which would be similar to if you're working for a hotel cluster and you're representing multiple hotels. All the job functions are very similar. The next one is corporate relocation. So if you haven't considered corporate relocation, there's always companies that are hiring employees in alternative locations, and so they need to move. Now, a corporate relocation company is kind of like a CVB. It helps people get acclimated to a new area. Okay, they identify where can this person live. They do house hunting for them. They take them around and show them the area. Where's the grocery store? Where's the bank? Where's the DMV? They help them get settled. So if you're a CVB person and you like the idea of showing a destination, this is a great option. All right, recruiting. Imelda, Nick, and Eden, and Brian, recruiting. If you're in sales of any kind and you manage a team and you interview people and you review resumes and you love this process, I would say recruiting is a great transition because you are evaluating people and people's skills, and you're interacting with them and you're figuring out if they're a good match for the company that you're representing. So it is a sales process. It's a very social process. And the last example I have is senior living. Now, of course, senior living, there's a boom because of the aging population. But when you look at senior living, again, it's similar to the hotel. You have people needing long-term stays. You've got food and beverage. You've got activities that the seniors are taking part of. So that is a similar type transition. Questions on the examples of similar industries?
None.
Okay. So next you're going to identify options. So what, aside from the ones that I just showed you, what other industries can you consider? Now I say a good starting point is to look at what are the current growth industries. And I've listed a lot of them here because through the pandemic, believe it or not, while hospitality has been devastated, there's other industries that are experiencing a huge growth. So you think about the education and online learning spaces, right? Again, I mentioned those of you who are doing training online, universities are offering classes. These, there's all kinds of organizations that provide these trainings. So you may consider that that's something that you're interested in. There's environmental, an example of that would be like a solar power company that's selling solar panels or something like that. And you may decide, hey, one of my interests is to be eco-friendly. Financial, this is huge because you've got banking, you've got insurance, and a number of folks that I know and have coached are actually have transitioned from hospitality into this industry. So they are taking classes to get their insurance license, to sell life insurance, or provide retirement insurance. The next one is food and grocery. Obviously, we need food. Anything related to the food is important. Healthcare obviously is big. I don't have to go into all of that. I will use an example that a lot of doctors are seeing people online now. So there is software that provides the technology similar to what we're using here in Zoom. So you might be interested in that type of position or working for an organization like that that provides that. Manufacturing could be any type of product. Philanthropy. Now, one of the things that I was interested in was the American Red Cross or these Alzheimer's associations. And these charitable organizations actually have a lot of sales positions. They're not necessarily called that, but we'll review that. Recreation, anything outdoor related. And talking about your interests, I was coaching someone and they had said, oh, I love skiing and I love snowboarding. And I said, okay, think about the companies that source and provide products for those industries. So it could be that you decide, I want to work for the company that makes skis or ski equipment. These are all things that you need to think outside the box about. Real estate. I have a number of friends that have transferred over into real estate. They have studied and received their license and are now selling homes and commercial office spaces. Anything shipping, delivery, logistics. So you think about Amazon, you think about Uber, you think about all of these companies that are in the shared economy, so to speak, as well, related to this are hiring. And then, of course, with COVID, sanitation and cleaning. So those are growth industries. And my next thought for you is, what companies are in your backyard? Okay, again, think about your interests. One company that comes to mind, because I love candles, and I used to work in Irvine, is Voluspa is a luxury candle maker, and they're in Irvine. And of course they would have a sales role, right? So these are the things that you should be thinking about. Any comments, questions on the industries?
Yes.
Okay.
There's actually a couple here. The first one is, what would be a good industry to transition to for a meeting planner?
That's a good one. So it depends on what aspects you want to focus on. And I'm actually going to cover this, because when you're in meeting or event planning, you can transition into marketing. Your entire job function may not be event planning, but event planning may be a function of marketing. So I'm not going to answer that specifically, but more generally, and I'll address it later in the presentation.
There's one other one. You're probably going to cover this, but it says when considering these industries, how do you sell yourself on your resume to these industries when your industry pretty much is completely in hospitality?
We're going to cover that. Absolutely. We'll get to that here shortly.
Great.
Very good question. That is a burning question, I know. Okay, and that is next on our slides here. This is a chart that I call the transferable skills categories. Everyone's talking about transferable skills, and with the folks that I coach in hospitality, there is a tendency to only see yourself as focused on travel and tourism and hospitality. And it's really hard to think of it more from a 30,000-foot view, and that's what I want to encourage you to do, is that when you are in a job and you're doing a certain function, that's all that you can see. When you take a step back, and you might have someone help you do this, right? It might be your friend or your significant other, but someone may need to help you get out of this micro and more on the macro level of what your skills are. So there's 5 categories here. And these are the categories that you're going to want to put on your resume. And you may need to do your resume over again. I know that several people have pretty much a standard way of listing out bullet points of things that they were responsible for in their jobs. And you do want to include that, but you actually, when you're looking to transfer into a different industry, you need to highlight more the general skill set. So I'm just going to quickly go through these. The first is analytical skills. So think about evaluating. Are you evaluating a star report at your hotel? If you're a director of sales, you're going to be looking at the star report. You're going to need to know how to translate that data. Okay, that evaluating data is a transferable skill. Problem solving, any type of problem solving, and I can't even give you a specific example. It's problem solving has to do with critical thinking. Can you think on your feet and provide a resourceful solution to something? Reporting information. Are you able to compile data and present it and report it? And any type of research. These are analytical skills that any employer is going to look for. And of course, it can be specific to hospitality, but any number of those can transfer into other industries. Communication. So within communication, there's written, verbal, and interpersonal. This is pretty vast. I've compiled them into one. Think about, are you typing up proposals to send to clients? That's written. Are you making a presentation to your clients? Obviously, that's verbal. And then how are you engaging and interacting with people, whether it's your coworkers or your clients? But in addition to that, if you're bilingual, if you're multilingual, that is a skill set that should be at the top of your resume. Okay, negotiating. So many people, I'm sure, on this webinar are negotiating contracts. Okay, that is not unique to hospitality. You could move into pharmaceutical sales and be negotiating agreement with a doctor's office. Okay, these are the things you want to be thinking about. And then persuasion or persuading, influencing someone or helping them to see a new perspective is a communication skill. You've got leadership, particularly, and not exclusively, but particularly if you are a manager of a team, you have leadership skills. And even if you're not a manager, but you're hoping to apply for a position that is within management, you would be able to show your leadership skills if you influenced another person in another department in your office in some way to shift a decision that was made within the organization. Perhaps you were coaching your team, you were training them how to be a better salesperson. You would be delegating a lot of the responsibilities. That is a leadership skill. And then motivating people, right? So many of us tend to just follow along, and those that are leaders tend to motivate the group. Then we've got management skills. So this would be anything from action planning, whether you're preparing a budget, you're in the accounting department and you're preparing a budget with the sales department, perhaps you're in marketing and you're preparing a marketing plan. That is action planning, that is a management skill. Conflict resolution. You know, this is something I actually have a lot of experience with, and it takes a certain skill to be able to navigate difficult situations. And if you're working with people, there's no doubt that you're going to be working with conflict resolution. If you're a front desk manager at a hotel and you have a customer that's upset because they don't like their room, they didn't like their food at the restaurant, you're going to be dealing with conflict resolution, and that needs to be on your resume. Okay, then there's management of people, which kind of falls into the leadership category as well. And then you have time and prioritization management. And this is huge because as we move into this fast-paced world of technology, time is of the essence. So if you can reflect that on your resume, that you know how to manage your time, that's just wonderful. And then the last category is technical. So if you have a skill set with a certain software, that needs to be on your resume. If you know how to navigate anything on the internet, you know how to create a website, things like that. Social media, if you know how to use platforms for updating social media, or you know how to do SEO, these are all things that, again, need to be on your resume. And then equipment setup. I'm terrible at this, I admit. But there's some people that are really great at this. If you're an AV, you know how to set up equipment. And you may move into a company that is focused on logistics of some kind of product that needs equipment set up. So again, we're looking at macro, we're looking at 30,000 foot view of what it is that you've done in your experiences. I'll take questions.
There's a couple of questions. So can we expect to see a significant salary cut when transitioning to another industry?
That's going to depend on what industry you're in and what the job titles are. I'm going to review that. I will say that one of the things that I had to do, that a number of people that I'm coaching with as well have to do, is look at your current financial situation. And if something is paying less, you actually probably need to consider it. You need to look at how you're living within your means, and are there things that you think that you need that you actually don't, and you'd be surprised that there is. So some of it's an adjustment in your lifestyle, and I would say that it's all dependent on the industry and what job title you're going after.
Oh, another great question. It says right now companies want extensive experience in sales and marketing, but it says entry level in their posting and their salary range. How do we break through this right now?
That's a challenge. There's a lot of mismatching of information. I think you're going to have to ask some questions through the application and interview process. Do any of the panelists want to take a stab at that one?
Sure, I will. It's Nick. That will always happen. And I think we're entering into very murky waters. And as you said, Michelle, people need to survive. And if you take a pay cut, you take a pay cut. If someone posts a job that wants extensive experience but is paying junior, that's something you have to consider. But as with anything, you can't do anything unless you get your foot in the door. So unless you take a first step, and the first step is to gain an interview, then it is to sell yourself. Then it is to find the problem, be the solution. So at the end of the day, if you do nothing, you will get nothing.
Correct. Yeah. I'll give you an example of someone I was working with. They were in meeting planning and they decided they lost their job, but they too took a pause and they evaluated what they really loved, what their passion was. And she had two things that were her passion: animals and being a florist. And she had actually received a certification to do so. And she decided that it was worth the pay cut because she loved floral arranging so much. And so she went ahead and moved into that industry, along with also volunteering her time with an animal shelter. So some of it really comes down to quality of life, you know, and as we're saying, people need to survive, and obviously you're going to know what your threshold is. That's part of the step one that I talked about, evaluation. But you really need to think about what's important to you.
There's actually a survey a couple of webinars ago, and one of the questions was just that. We asked respondents to order in order of preference, which was most important to them. And surprisingly enough, salary was number 3 out of 4 on the list.
Yeah.
So the highest was job satisfaction. So sometimes, you know, what does it say? Confucius says, if you find a job you truly love, you'll never work a day in your life.
True.
So and obviously that doesn't pay the bills. But if there's a way with the, you know, if you love the animals and you love florists, maybe you can figure out a way between the two of them to make what you made before, but maybe not in one, but maybe in both.
Exactly. Exactly. So this next slide here, I'm going to talk about attributes, and I'm actually kind of shocked at the number of, you know, trainings out there, information out there that talks about transferable skill sets but does not address attributes. And people ask me, what are attributes, Michelle? Why is this important? And why does this need to be on my resume? Attributes tend to get lumped into skill set, and I pull them out. So when I'm coaching people, I actually have them pull this out of their resume and put it at the top of their resume, is to list out the qualities that you bring, who you are, what are you bringing to this company? So there's 3 different categories. There's your attitude, your drive, and how you relate to others. And I've put together some bullets here of examples of attributes. I'm going to quickly name them. Adaptable, you know, also you could be adaptable and flexible. Assertive, collaborative. If you're a team player, you're going to have collaboration. Dependable, do you show up on time? Do you say what you're going to do? Are you driven? Are you motivated? Are you enthusiastic? Do you have a great positive attitude? Are you friendly to people? Are you able to work independently? If a job description says you need to be able to work independently, that should be on the resume and in the cover letter. If you're innovative and you come up with resourceful ways to problem solve, you're going to want to put that down. You may be loyal. You may be looking for an organization that you can be loyal to that is also looking for an employee that is going to stay a long time. I talked about motivated and then positive. So do not leave this out. I cannot stress this enough. This is where when people say I've applied for so many jobs, I'm not getting callbacks, you need to make sure this is on your resume. Okay, because we have a lot of marketing and salespeople on this webinar, I I used this as an example. People want to know, besides, if I'm a sales manager or director of sales, I can easily go on Indeed or LinkedIn and say director of sales jobs in Los Angeles, right? You're going to get a million different things. You're also going to get a lot of commission only positions that pop up. So when you think about what your job functions have been, but more importantly, what it is you really want to do, because you may have been in sales, but you're like, I actually hate sales. I don't like anything about it. I don't want to do prospecting. I don't want to close the sale. Then you shouldn't put that on your resume. Then you need to look at some other skill sets. But what I've done here is giving you samples of similar job titles that have similar functions. So I used manager. I mean, this could be associate. It could be an entry-level position. It could be a director level. But account manager, right? If you worked at a property or you worked at a CVB, you were managing your clients. You were managing the account from start to finish. Business development, you may have worked on sponsorships or partnerships with companies. That's business development. You may have been in customer service at the hotel. And you could look for jobs that are client relations focused or relationship manager. There's a lot of those out there. Talking about similar industries, community or property manager. If you're in marketing, you might want to be a copy editor or a writer. Again, in marketing, you might decide, I want to go into corporate communications. Development manager. So if you want to work for an organization, it could be an educational institution, it could be a charitable organization. They're raising money, right? They're doing fundraising. You could be a fundraising person. And oftentimes those titles are development manager, major gifts, planned giving. These are all sales related jobs. Membership manager, project manager, and product manager. A product manager could be an apparel, some type of apparel that you're selling. It could be any product. And just because you worked at a hotel doesn't mean you can't sell another product. So for those who responded to the survey and said, I think Mitch was at 38%. 38% were thinking about starting their own business.
Yeah, about a third, yes.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on this because it is important. And obviously I started my own business. So these are the tips that I have for you to be thinking about. What problem do you solve? And I think Professor Nez last week covered this on the webinar, that you need to be able to solve someone's problem. Okay, so figure that out. And can you start working with a handful of clients? If so, and you have the ability long-term to be able to not have a full-time job, then great. What type of setup do you need? What kind of business license do you need? Are you selling a service or are you selling a product? And then do you have the resource and support to launch it? Because it's not an easy feat. It's not overnight that you launch a business. It takes a lot of planning, and you need to make sure that you have those resources. Excuse me a moment. Do we have more questions at this point?
Yes, I do. So what if you're trying to transition out of a role, say example sales, but recruiters only want to put you back into the same role, or else they will not give you a chance to interview? How do you change this on your resume to avoid this?
I would say that, again, you need to look at your skill set. You have to get very nitty-gritty into the detail of what is it that you want to do. We still have that to cover in the remaining steps. You need to learn how to articulate, besides sales, what else do you bring to the table? And then, in fact, go find another recruiter. Go find multiple recruiters. You need to be resourceful, and don't just settle on speaking with one person and hope that they're going to find you the next job that you're going to be in. So the third step is to prepare and plan. So now that we've kind of filtered what industry segments, what different job titles, what your skill sets are. You now need to apply this. So as that question is very pointed, if someone boxes you into a sales role, you need to look at what you did. It might even be volunteer work that you don't have on your resume that is unrelated to sales. You need to put that on your resume, and you also need to write down exactly what you want, because you can't find what you want if you don't know what you're looking for. And I know that sounds like super cliche, but it's true. So write down a definition of what you're looking for, the type of work that you want to do. Consider all prior experience. So if, like myself, I was 16, I worked in a restaurant. Now I was serving food and doing the cashier. That is a fast-paced environment. That is something that can transfer to any type of business. So these are the things that, again, you need to figure out. And then have your relatable achievements and success stories that support what it is that you want to do, right? There's nothing like telling a story that has nothing to do with what you would be doing in a job. And this happens a lot at interviews. It's quite surprising. I'm sure the panelists would agree that someone's talking about work that is completely unrelated to the job. You're going to need to create benchmark goals. So again, I know some of this is like, well, duh, Michelle, I know that, but we know things and we often don't do them. And so that's why I'm reminding you that you need to know exactly where you're at. What's your location? Okay, when do you need to have an income by? You can work backwards. You can start 6 months from now and work your plan backwards. But you also need to break down steps of notable progress. So you might set a benchmark for yourself that, hey, in a month from now, I want to have had 3 to 5 interviews and job offers across my desk. And think big, don't limit yourself. Okay, then you're going to list out your actions, and these are examples that I've bulleted here. So work with a recruiter and a staffing agency. There's staffing agencies that have temp work, and that might be your next transition. And remember my quote at the beginning, that transition is not the final destination. So if you end up in a job that you're like, okay, I'll do this for a little bit, that is okay. That is okay, as long as you have a long-term goal. Okay, research and interview companies and contacts in your new identified industries. This is huge. You guys, LinkedIn is available. You have, lots of connections you can reach out to and see if they're working in an industry or for a company that you want to work for. And, make sure that you're talking to those people, learning what that company's like. This is very, very important. Okay, update your search with different job titles. We already went through that. And then, of course, get additional certifications. If you can't apply for a job because you don't have a certain education or certification, you need to go ahead and figure out how you're going to squeeze that in. Any questions? And I'll wrap up with our last step here.
Yes. There's a question. So someone is over 60 years old and they've been with one company in sales related roles for more than 30 years and are now seeking a new opportunity and concerned about how how interested any prospective employers will be about me. Although I have a great track record in my sales career. Any advice?
So I would say that, look, if you've been with a company in a certain function, sales, for 30 years, you're a loyal person, right? You're going to want to go and find an employer who wants loyal people working for them. And again, it comes down to breaking out. Maybe there's other things that you've done in your life that have given you other skill sets besides sales. And you need to, again, clarify and define what your interests are, because just because you spent 30 years in sales doesn't mean that you want to continue down that road. But I'll ask the panelists to respond as well.
Do you want that now?
Yeah, and then I have one more question, then we're going to have to wrap it up.
Yep, we're almost done.
Okay. There are so many jobs going right now that you're not going to get noticed. It's a fairy tale to think that sending in your resume is going to get you noticed if you're lacking in experience. And what I think there's a misunderstanding about what recruiters do. We work for the client. We try to fill positions. So when you send your resume and say, I want you to work for me, we don't charge the candidate. Things are starting to change, but in all this, with all the noise right now, with everybody, the thousands upon thousands of hospitality people who are getting laid off, 28,000 today from Disney, you need to do something to stand out. You need an advocate. So if you are working with a recruiter, unless they're listening to you and talking to you, if your recruiter isn't talking to you, move on, because you're just another resume. A good recruiter will listen to you, help you identify those skills and those skill sets. I had somebody contact me, 16 years with the same agency, it's a corporate travel agency in New York, just came on the market because of COVID and because of a takeover, used to earning $190,000. So we put two and two together. We looked on the map of where she's based in New York, where a competitor was weak in New York, but strong in California, Florida, and Texas. And we submitted her with an idea that said, would you consider taking her half pay, November, December, January, to get her through the holidays, nice training period, and then full pay from February because her non-compete doesn't lift until March. Guess what? The president of the company is looking at it this morning. So good recruiters like Eden and Brian have contacts that you don't have. They have vision that you don't have. Use a good recruiter, but if they are not talking to you, they're not interested, or they're rude.
All right, I know, Mitch, we're on time. If we can go just a few minutes over, that would be
Yeah,
absolutely
because
wonderful.
there's actually a couple of questions and then a couple of good news things to share. I'd
Great.
like to kind of present
Great.
everyone. So
Yep.
here's another one. So exactly. So when an employer looks at a 20+ year experience resume, they often think, quote, expensive and not tech savvy, possibly. And they won't even provide an opportunity for an interview. Even when salary has not been discussed. How do you overcome this?
Again, I think it's similar to what Nick just shared about your process. You got to break through the noise somehow. You got to stand out, talk to people, get some ideas. There's no one size fits all. There's no magic pill for that. You have to do some hard work, and you've got to leverage your network, which is my next point. You need to communicate what you're looking for, and you need to communicate it out to everyone. Call your friends, call your old coworkers, talk to everybody you know and say, here's what I'm looking for. And you may come across an opportunity that a friend refers that has nothing to do with what you're interested in, but again, it might be your transition plan. So just, again, communicate out. Find an accountability partner. Now, I'm a coach and a consultant, so I'm going to advise that you work with a coach because a coach is someone who guides you through this very challenging process. If you don't have the finances to support that, get an accountability partner that is a mentor that is willing to mentor you because they care for you and because they want to help you. It could be a friend, it could be anyone. Join a new circle. If you just identified what new industry you want to try and get into, go figure out what associations serve that industry, go join that association, and then volunteer. Very quickly, these are tips. I actually spoke with a number of folks that have transitioned out of the hospitality industry, and I compiled their feedback to share with you. I'm very grateful to them. But as you're going through, you're executing your plan, you need to follow up and follow through. And we all know that being in sales, follow up, follow through. Those are the people that close the business. So during the search process, connect with others and interview those in desired industries. Have them look at your resume. Say, hey, is this the lingo that your company or your industry uses? Because if you're sending your resume and again, the lingo doesn't match, you're not going to get considered. Follow up during the application process. Don't get hung up on the job title or the salary. Read the description, because sometimes these things are mismatched. They just happen. And then make sure you're matching your skills with the job description that are relevant. Don't send a laundry list of things that you do. Make sure it's focused on what the job description is requesting. And then after the interview, again, articulate how you help solve their need. Please send a thank you note. Don't just send an email. Send a video. I don't know, do something different. And then don't forget to ask for the job, right? We go and we then forget to ask for the job. So if you're really interested, make sure you do that. And my last quote here is, change gets us to grow in the direction towards our ultimate success. And with that, I appreciate you letting me go just a few minutes. I am offering to everyone on this webinar a 30-minute free consultation with me. I can talk with you about whatever you're struggling with. It is completely complimentary. You can go onto my Calendly page and schedule that. You may email me, you may connect with me on LinkedIn, both for my company and myself individually, and then please visit my website, alignmentadvising.com. And with that, I am closed. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Cool.
All right.
Wow, wow, wow. That was amazing. Thank you very, very much.
You're welcome.
There's a couple of quick questions. First of all, what are your recommendations for researching salaries outside the hospitality industry? Are there any one or two websites that you could recommend?
Sure. Salary.com, Glassdoor. You can just Google salary calculators. You know, it's pretty easy to find.
Okay, great. A little bit of good news to share. So one writes, I believe that a good amount of people will leave the industry for a while to explore different careers. I personally plan on coming back within less than 2 years. And in the interim, I have obtained 2 insurance licenses during this time, and I'm in training at a local agency. So that's a bit of good news.
Yeah.
Another one writes, I have applied for positions in the industry and outside the industry, and there seems to be a recent trend for more job posting within the industry. All recruiters and hiring managers that I've talked to say there are several months at least away from hiring. So, well, there you go. So I wanted to thank everyone for attending, and most certainly our speaker today, Michelle Carlin. Thank you so much for giving your presentation today. I also wanted to take an opportunity to thank our panelists, Nick Reed and Melda Bermudez from travel staff, and Brian Marcus and Eden Sleeger from Global Hospitality. I'm Mitch Woolley, your moderator. This concludes our webinar for today. Thank you so much for attending and for giving us your time today. We bid you a farewell.